A very warm welcome to everyone who have joined our webinar, CRM Requirements Quiver of 300 plus arrows. I would like to introduce myself first. I am Malika and I am the Chief Operating Officer of Cloudnology. With me, I have Ajay Dubedi here, who is the CEO of Cloudnology, and he has been working with Salesforce technology for the past 9 years. And today we have him to share his expertise on requirement gathering. So I'll be handing over to Ajay to share a few words on his expertise.
Thank you, Malika. Thank you so much, and thanks for our Friday audience today to join us. And today I'm going to share some special secrets about how I try to make sure that we are able to do some good requirement gathering by asking specific questions. I call them arrows. So just to make sure that those arrows are hitting the right goal. So I'm going to share some of my secret questions and a very enhanced list of right questions which we are supposed to ask to the end prospect or whosoever is getting the CRM setup done.
Before we start with our astounding webinar, I would like to take a few minutes to introduce Cloudnology to our audience. Cloudnology is a leading Salesforce development and consulting company that offers Salesforce customization, integration, and migration services. Today, we will be discussing the CRM requirement gathering that will be satisfying your business goals. In this webinar, we'll also talk through various Salesforce implementations and many more interesting topics. Before we get started on the glorious journey, I would like to inform you all certain aspects of this webinar. If you have any questions for any of us, I request you to please let us know at the end of this webinar. You can even directly raise your queries at ajay.dubedi@cloudnology.com or coo@cloudnology.com. The agenda for today's webinar is, first of all, we'll be discussing about 300 plus questions on 10 plus Salesforce features or products, CRM requirement gathering, Salesforce CRM and Products Implementation Requirement Gathering, mid and small size Salesforce Implementation Kickoff call questions to ask, Project Coordinator's Guide for Salesforce CRM discussion and requirements gathering. So now let's get started with our webinar. I will be talking about requirement gathering and use case scenarios and the best techniques to actually gather requirements from the clients. Primarily done during stakeholders meetings, requirement gathering is the exploratory process of researching and documenting project requirements. Shockingly, more than 70% of failed projects miss the mark due to a lack of requirement gathering. That's no smaller number. Deadlines, scope, cost overrun without proper requirements identification at the outset, all of those elements will be affected. Design issues to the product will be impacted and developmental delays will occur. Ultimately, your product won't be set up for optimal success as it faces an overrun budget. So what exactly is requirement gathering? Requirement gathering can be also mentioned as essential part of any project and project management. Understanding fully what a project will deliver is critical to its success. Requirement gathering sounds like common sense, but surprisingly, it's an area that is given far too little attention. Many projects start with the barest headline list of requirements only to find later the customer's needs have not been adequately understood. One way to avoid this problem is by producing a statement of requirements or list of deliverables. The techniques that can be used for gathering these requirements, and in them, the first of all is either interviews or meetings with the stakeholders. These meetings, these are an invaluable tool at the beginning of the process for getting background information on the business problems and understanding a current world perspective of what the system being proposed needs to do. You also need to make sure that your interviews or meetings cover a diverse cross-section of different stakeholders so that the requirements are not skewed towards one particular function or area. The second way is to sharing questions or a list of questionnaires with the client. So one of the challenge with the interviews is that you will get the information that the person is consciously aware of. Sometimes there are latent requirements and features that are better obtained through questionnaires. By using carefully chosen probing questions based on the information captured in prior interviews, you can drill down on specific areas that the stakeholders don't know are important but can be critical to the eventual design of the system or to the overall project. The next is user observation. So one of the best ways to determine the features of a system that does not result in paving the cow path, that is building a slightly improved version of the current state, is to observe users actually performing their daily tasks and ideally recording the actions and activities that take place. By understanding the holistic context of how they perform the task, you can write requirements that will reinvent the processes rather than just automating them, and will ensure that usability is paramount. The next one could be workshops. Once you have the broad set of potential requirements defined, you will need to reconcile divergent options and contrasting views to ensure that the system will meet the needs of all users and not just the most vocal group. Workshops are a crucial tool that can be used to validate the initial requirements, generate additional detail, gain consensus, and capture the constraining assumptions. Next is brainstorming. This is a powerful activity which can be performed either in the context of a workshop or on its own. By considering different parts of the system and considering what-if scenarios or blue sky ideas, you can break out of the context of the current state and consider visionary ideas for the future. Tools such as whiteboards or mind mapping software can be very helpful in this phase. Next is use cases and scenarios, which we'll be also discussing later in our webinar. In this, once you have a high-level functional requirements defined, it is useful to develop different use cases and scenarios that can be used to validate the functionality in different situations and to discover any special exception or boundary cases that need to be considered. The last but not the least is prototyping. There is a truth to the saying, I don't know what I want, but I know that I don't want that. Often stakeholders won't have a clear idea about the requirements that they want, but if you put together several different prototypes of what the future could be, they will know which parts they like. You can then synthesize the different favored parts of the prototypes to reverse engineer the requirements. These prototypes may include creating mock-ups based on the requirements that are given by the client to show the look and feel of their vision that they have. Again, the points that we mentioned here is not limited, and any company can either include all of them or some of them based on the project's requirement. The next is ways of capturing the requirement. Now, several things can be used for capturing or writing the requirement or making a list so the team later on can have a look. And some of them are a document, or you can even use a spreadsheet either in Microsoft or in Google. You can even create a presentation showing the flow of the requirement, then using modeling diagram. So a UML is a standard language for specifying, visualizing, constructing and documenting the artifacts of software systems. UML is not a programming language, but tools can be used to generate code in various languages using UML diagrams. This has a direct relation with object-oriented analysis and design. After some standardization, UML has become an OMG standard. I'm also going to talk about some common mistakes that must be avoided. Some of them are basing a solution on complex or cutting-edge technology and then discovering that it cannot be easily rolled out in the real world. The next is not prioritizing the requirements, for example, must have, should have, could have, and would have, known as the Moscow principle. Insufficient consultation with the real users and practitioners solving the problem. And solving the problem before you know what the problem is, and lacking a clear understanding and making assumptions rather than asking. Requirement gathering is all about creating a clear, concise and agreed set of customer requirements that allow you to provide what the customer wants. I'm going to talk a bit about use case, and we'll also share a very simple day-to-day life example, and then we'll be talking about the checklist that should be used while you're gathering requirements. So a brief about the use case is that use case represents the actions that are required to enable or abandon a goal, and it has multiple paths that can be taken by any user at any one time. A use case scenario is a single path through the use case, and some of the importance of using use cases is they hold functional requirements in an easy to read and tracking format. They present the goal of an interaction between an actor and the system. They are multi-level and one use case or can extend the functionality of another. Now the example that I'm going to use is a money withdrawal example. So the purpose of this use case is to withdraw money from an ATM. Overview: the use case starts with when the customer inserts his or her card into the system. The system then requests the user PIN. The system validates the PIN. If the validation succeeded, the customer can choose the withdrawal option, else alternative validation failure will be executed. The customer enters the amount of the cash withdrawal. The system checks the amount of the cash in the user's account and its credit limit. If the withdrawal amount is in the range, the system will dispense the cash and the print withdrawal receipt, else alternative amount exceeded is executed. From this point onwards, I'll be handing over to Ajay to share the best tips to gather requirements and based on the different Salesforce products and features. So over to you, Ajay.
Thanks, Malika. That was a very well defined sort of way to explain what is requirement gathering and what is use case scenarios. Probably with a small good example of withdrawing money from your ATM. Okay, so that was really good. And to start with, let me briefly talk about like what I'm going to explain and what sort of categories I have built up. Okay, so the different categories which I have built up are based upon my experience of last around 10-11 years of doing multiple kind of different like Salesforce related, CRM related projects. Okay, and I have touched on, you can call it like that Salesforce 360 degree services. So I am able to touch on like each part of them, and while doing that, in many of my prospect meetings, let it be like a face-to-face prospect meeting or online or wherever or on paper, like whenever we draw something or design something. Okay, so we had a lot of questions. So I was able to always summarize those set of questions, and I was able to see that there was a recurring set of similar questions coming up again and again. Okay, now that have led me to start creating a list probably 7 years back. Okay, so I was always interested into sort of trying to categorize different set of requirements and trying to identify like, okay, what is repetitive in it, what is the next set of requirements which are repetitive in it, as well as what are the next set of problems which a particular prospect would get in a repetitive fashion. Okay, and the very first thing which I was able to understand is there are like two ways how we can identify that. So number one, it is either a new Salesforce implementation or it is an existing Salesforce implementation in which there is some issue. There is some showstoppers. Okay, so based upon that, we can broadly divide this entire thing into two categories. Okay, and now moving forward, I was also able to identify that there are so many different products of Salesforce, right? So whenever there is different products of Salesforce, we also try to identify that, okay, which particular product fits in which particular domain and what are the set of generic questions or issues which they are facing. So what I have divided is, I have divided this particular presentation as well as my master sheet of 300 plus questions into 7 different subcategories. Now in each of those categories, as you can see probably on your screen now, is new Salesforce implementation, managed package, AppExchange, integration project, existing CRM enhancements, data CRM migrations, and special tasks. I call them special tasks. So there are a list of it. And I can also create, like, there is all this special task list is always going to expand more and more. And at the end of the day, we also at times get like what sort of engagement you want and whether that sort of engagement, a dedicated, a T&M or a fixed bid, fits into your model or not. Okay. Now I have tried to prioritize this in list like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 based upon the majority of projects which we get. So you can call it like the number one is the set of requirements which we get most of the time. Okay, so whenever a sales team member call me up and they tell me like, okay, we have a new client and I know, or we have a new prospect, I know that, okay, it is going to be number one, a new Salesforce implementation or a app development for AppExchange or an integration project, because that's what we do most of the time and that's what we are good at. Okay, so let's move on. So yeah, now the first set of checklist you would say before we enter into a meeting on, and it's mostly like a particular meeting checklist, okay, rather than a requirement gathering discussion checklist. Okay, so what we need to make sure is we know your customer sort of. You need to know which domain that particular customer is in. Okay, you need to know where that particular prospect has reached out to you from, probably from LinkedIn or whatever is the channel from which you have got that prospect, so that you can identify which particular social media channels or which particular channels they are using. Okay, now obviously every sales team must have a account mining process to identify about that particular individual or a particular client, because at times many people have like a blunt idea, okay, like okay, how can we develop or design this particular app for AppExchange. Now even we cater those ideas as well. We try to ensure that we are able to help them build their app for AppExchange. Okay, so that is the kind of approach, and we need to be well prepared with like what sort of meeting we are going into, and definitely be ready with your company presentation with the basic set of case studies, or to say like the domain specific case studies for which we are actually going to have a meeting with a prospect. Okay, and some very basic things like probably call recording with obviously approved permission, and joining the meeting 5 minutes early, which gives much more confidence and sort of help us to settle down before that particular meeting happens. So next, so let us begin the checklist. Okay, so first of all, new Salesforce implementation. And whenever I get a project, or to say like a meeting in which we get new Salesforce implementation, a small a small kid in me goes yippee, because it's very easy for me, or to say like I'm very much confident on getting a new implementation done rather than fixing someone else's mess. Okay, so and majority of the time what happens is a client goes ahead and does something in production. Okay, and they try to create some automation rules, some fields, and they might end up within a 6 months or a year time period by creating like 400 fields, out of which 300 they are not using at all. So those kind of projects, we push them into a category of existing CRM fixes. Now what I'm going to talk about is Salesforce new implementation, and everyone, whoever is in this business, is supposed to understand the Salesforce Customer 360. Okay, so how the Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, Marketing, Services, and how they all are related, and whenever we are into a discussion of requirement gathering, how each one of them is valuable to ask. Okay, so definitely a simple way to start, and most of the time what I do is I try to play sort of a game of trying to be as basics and as novice as possible. Okay, and obviously at times I should know what we are actually asking, but it's more towards we are trying to ensure that the problems which the client is having or a prospect is having, are they not very basic one, or they are like very advanced. If the client is a technical client, they will be knowing exactly what they need. Okay, but in case of a non-technical client or a prospect who is a business owner, or who has just purchased a Salesforce CRM, or who is interested in a CRM license, getting a Salesforce license, you need to ask them what is the business process. Okay, is the business process divided into various segments like campaigns, running a campaigns, okay, how your lead capturing is being done, how you are considering opportunity whenever a particular lead comes in, when do you call it a closed deal, okay, or when do you call it a warm or a hot lead. Okay, so those sort of questions you need to be very straightforward, ask them, and be well prepared with that. Okay, so and the list is there. So are you planning to utilize Salesforce CRM for your end client management as well? Because at times you might see that many of the users who use Salesforce CRM are actually doing it because they are not able to manage their existing client base. And to do that, yes, you have communities, you have so many different tools within CRM, Salesforce CRM, which can be utilized and which can help you out to get those set of clients in pipeline, answer their queries, or get the new product releases to them. So whatever way you want to explain that. Okay. Now the categories in which I have defined it, I definitely want to ask my prospects is, what is your existing CRM? Like, do you use a CRM which is very much similar to Salesforce, or worst case scenario, you might be using a sheet, an Excel sheet. Okay. So whatever it is, we need to understand it, and with the help of that, we also try to identify what are your 3 top issues which you are facing in your existing CRM. So you can imagine this set of list as sort of a checklist. Okay. So whenever we go into a meeting or I go into a meeting, I try to create a checklist and I try to put check on each one of them based upon the questions which are relevant and which are getting answered clearly. Okay. And the answer and the questions to which the answer we are not getting clearly can be easily marked as like, okay, need further discussion. Okay. Or to be decided. So if I scroll down more towards the checklist, and you can easily identify like data. Okay, so data is a crucial part of any CRM. Like, be a boss, a manager, like a company owner, even like me, what I want to know is the data on my list, is the data on my reports, the data on my charts are 100% live and they are true. Okay, there should not be any issue with that. So what sort of sample data that particular prospect is already having. Okay, make sure that we are also asking them like to share their set of sample data records, which can help us identify setting up the data model. Okay, which at the very beginning of the step of doing a new Salesforce implementation, we'll have to design a data model. Okay, so that is one. And also another checklist is files and attachments. So if you are a service based company, or if you are selling a product or any virtual services, or however way you are trying to sell things, definitely the products or the billing systems, they will be having some sort of files. Okay, and by files I mean to say images or attachments or PDFs or docx or whatever. So if those set of data is there, and I categorize them in like actual attachments or files, how we are going to manage it, how it is being managed right now. Okay, and there are the list of questions you can see on your screen. What all products you sell, are they fixed or endlessly customizable? A very good example is we did a project in which there was a image like Google Maps, a company who was selling the satellite images. Okay, now I was wondering before that meeting that, okay, satellite images means they are just selling their one data, that's it. No, that's what's not there. The products they had was highly customizable. Like, you will have to give a latitude and a longitude to identify which sort of zone of that picture you want, that map you want, and to what depth. So sort of even from a 1 meter sort of a ratio, or a 10 meters, or an inch, or even to a level of a centimeter ratio within a pixel. So you can define many times your products into an endlessly customizable way, which we should understand, because if we don't understand what our prospects are selling, we will not be able to set it up in our CRM. Okay. Then again, automation. So automation is a key thing. It's a very key element which we definitely try to make sure that what sort of automation they need, we are able to set it up and try to get that particular automation done. Okay, and automation generally involves sending out, as simple as sending out an email alert. Okay, to a complex level as setting up some trigger to ensure that the billings mail is done and we get the payment is received on our funnel and it updates on the reports, and a weekly report or a monthly report goes on, and it also updates the forecasting as well as the quarterly reports or annual reports. So all those sort of automation questions we definitely need to ask, where that lead capturing is being happening, or lead assignment rules is also a very complex automation depending upon the size of the project or how a particular customer is trying to manage their lead base and pass it on to their BDs. How they are going to do that, even that matters. So we also have users and role profile. Now we need to understand like what is the team size, okay, a particular prospect, or if that particular team size is not there right now, but what could be the team size in future? What is the vision of a particular prospect of using that particular CRM? It might be that they are having certain set of users, so we need to ask like how many users will be using this new system and what would be the roles for those particular users. We will have to define each profile and their departments or job roles, and this is actually going to help us identify what will be the use case scenario. Okay, so a particular user logs in, he goes or she goes and does a particular set of tasks allocated to that, probably create a set of activities, does a calling to that particular lead, identify which particular prospect or which particular products are getting into which particular set of sales, and generate some reports here and there, and generate so that entire particular that entire flow of use case we need to identify, and that will start from the user profile definition, like what are the set of users, what are the set of roles which are getting defined. Now there is also a set of interesting points whenever we do a new Salesforce implementation is the external system. Okay, so obviously now we are setting up Salesforce as a new implementation. That simply means that the data, there are a lot of automation things, probably mailing systems, probably they might be having Microsoft Teams, they might be having G Suite. Okay, so that is being that is supposed to get integrated within Salesforce as well. Okay, now what all are those external systems and which all external systems are we supposed to integrate with? Now we need to also identify them. Then we go on more sort of a generic questions. Okay, so what is the timeline? What are the timeline and the different phases? If you means a prospect is having some set of defined timeline or a phase, like okay, AJ or AK, like we want this particular phase to have only 5 features to go live on, and we can rest with the remaining ones in phase 2. Okay, so we need to identify how many phases we are able to define, and especially in a mid-size or a big-size projects, we need to define the set of phases which we will be doing this on. And other one is reports and dashboards. I'm quite sure it's your favorite because that is what we do. Okay, so reports and dashboards, yes, we need to ask specifically which reports and which dashboards. So number one, let me take a step back. Salesforce by default have lots of reports and dashboards already set up. Okay, so we can take those lists and we can try to ensure that okay, which all particular reports are important according to you. Okay, and if that doesn't matches with the client requirements, or there are certain set of reports which are unique, and can that be customizably built within the reports system in Salesforce, which is like one of the best system in all the CRM industry. Salesforce reports and dashboards are really the best. I've used many different CRM and I have helped them integrate on it. Okay, so before we move on to manage package, AppExchange and other checklists, because since this was a huge new implementation part, so Malika, is there any question?
Yes, actually I did got one question. So you mentioned about talking about questions based on Salesforce products or the features that are present in Salesforce, and many times we have seen that people also need to understand the business process. but they often fail to cross-question and just stop at only one question, that is, please tell me a bit about your business process. So do you think that one person need to create a sort of a separate checklist to understand the business process, or it can be merged with this checklist?
Yeah, indeed. I would suggest everyone to create their own checklist. Okay, so try to make it as unique as possible, because I am looking toward from a very high level, and that is why I am able to create such wide set of questions.
Right.
Now, if we get into a granular set, yes, each business process you need to identify. Okay, so right from as granular as what should be the color theme of the email template which will be sent to a customer versus which will be sent to an internal team. So even to that level, you need to identify and sort of write it down, or obviously have 2, 3, 4 options readily available. So yes, understanding the business process and having a set of questions, you should have your own unique set of questions. I would advise probably in our next webinar sometime this year, I would probably do another set of questions or questions to ask based upon the domains. Okay, so if the client is on an education domain, okay, if the client is on a on finance industry, okay, so what sort of different questions specific to that domain we can ask. So yes, you should definitely have those set of questions. To tell you the secret, yes, we have, but we are not going to reveal it.
Yes. So thank you, Ajay, for that. And I do believe that I think domain-wise questions will be very much in demand in our audience as well. So please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So let me start with Managed Package AppExchange. Now that is one of my very favorite topics. And right from the very beginning, when I did my first website, like ajdubedi.com, even in that I started the best practices of AppExchange, app development, best practices on how to clear on the security review process, okay, and even the technical review. So I know exactly how app development process happens, and that is why we are able to create a set of questions, okay. Now, a managed package on Salesforce, ideally what happens is, like, many times a particular client comes to us with an idea, okay, or an idea from scratch, number one, or number two, it could be already an existing app which is not in Salesforce, and they need to generate a plugin, okay, so plugin into Salesforce. Or third, it could be a full suite, like an app suite for Salesforce natively, okay. So you can identify like almost all the products present on AppExchange right now either fall in any one of these 3 categories, okay. So the very beginning of any conversation starts with explain your idea, okay, explain your business idea. And also it's very tricky, and at times I haven't seen many places in which Salesforce have mentioned their in their business their entire AppExchange process, which is not being mentioned on it. So many times we need to ask them, like, okay, what is the business process which you try to implement, okay. And by business process I mean to say, like, in the app itself, how it will be beneficial for your app users. So have you done a customer evaluation, okay, have you done all the set of concepts, whether that particular app or business idea is already present in AppExchange in some or the other form or not. If it is already present, then why is the need of creating this new app? So what are those 3 awesome features because of which your app is going to sell? Someone is going to buy it or work on it. So definitely those kind of intriguing, very intriguing questions, exchange of questions and answers do need to take place, okay. And as I already mentioned, if it is a plugin, then do you already have an API built on your app which is outside Salesforce or not? Otherwise, we might end up doing a development in multiple different phases. Like, we'll have to design some sort of APIs or a middleware or something like that, okay. Now, to understand that, to make sure that we successfully do the AppExchange app, we need to make sure that that particular client is able to get the core 5 features or core 10 features for MVP. Okay, so what are those 3, 5, 4 core features which you want? Okay, and one of the most amazing thing is like we need to also train our clients or our prospect who is having that particular idea that Salesforce might have other features as well for which there should be a separate development happening. Okay, a simple example is a particular app which we designed for one of the customers, which was for document management. Okay, so Salesforce by default have some sort of document management system, and within the Salesforce admin profile or a Salesforce user license profile, you can definitely have much more app for documents and app management. But what about those community users? What about Marketing Cloud? Do you want that same feature in different clouds or not? Okay, so those set of questions we are supposed to ask, and definitely. So there are a few more slides left, so I won't be able to go each one of those questions, guys. So I'll be talking much more about on a high level, and the next set of questions are in integration project. Okay, so should I go ahead with that?
Yes, please.
Okay, so integration projects, the purpose of integration we need to understand, and no matter how different tools like Delboomi or Zapier or other different tools are able to integrate your X database with Y database, okay, still there are many integration which are not doable by these systems. Okay, and especially in tools which are not having a well-defined set of APIs or a highly configurable way of setting a batch of records from system A to Salesforce. So we need to identify the purpose of integration, data to be integrated, the sample data to be integrated, whether that particular integration will happen manually, because if it is a one-time integration or one-time data transfer being done, it should be a simple data migration project, okay, rather than doing a full-fledged integration for it, okay, which might cost heavily. Okay, so integration project, again, the APIs are available or not. APIs can be very useful in case of an automated integration project. Okay, and if there is no API, then obviously we will have to do with a middleware. Now, whenever we talk about middleware, yes, you need to design a middleware. It can be designed in Heroku, it can be designed in AWS, but we will have to definitely jump from Salesforce to other technology level as well. So it might be some other technology which we will be using to develop or design that particular middleware, and what is the exact necessity of that middleware. That is also needs to be defined. Otherwise, on a basic level, you can definitely do all sort of API based integration from Salesforce to any third party system as it is. Now, the fourth checklist, and a less exhaustive one, is existing CRM enhancement. And whenever there is, as in the very beginning I mentioned, like it will be a new CRM or an existing CRM. Okay, so an existing CRM, whenever we try to do an existing CRM enhancement, we need to identify that the basic KYC is done or not, and the existing Salesforce orgs are set up properly or not, and how heavily or how lightly that particular Salesforce org is configured. Especially we have seen like many of our clients, they go ahead and just purchase a Salesforce license and they forget about it, or to say like they don't know how to set it up properly, and it stays there for a year. Okay, and in those cases it's almost like a fresh start, but still whatever experiment has been done on that CRM which have failed, which we need to fix, we need to ask that. And that helps us to like number of custom objects created, number of app installed, number of pages, lightning pages, whether it is validation rules or triggers and workflow rules, everything is being approved, or to say like it's working properly and was created for the right reason, is existing in your CRM or not. Okay, now the existing CRM, again there are a couple of repetitive things you can see, like the data model part. Yes, we need to ask the data model thing, and and then again the lighting, the code part, the development part, and so on. So existing CRM enhancement is always very focused on 5-10 issues and then handing it over or passing it over more towards like a management or a support project. Okay, so it goes on like, okay, we have made sure that you have reached to from point A to point B, and point B is now very useful for your org or to say for your company, and you are able to at least utilize some part of the CRM, and then it moves on for a regular new enhancements or new developments going on again and again. Yeah.
So here, Ajay, I'm gonna ask a question. So do you think, since we already talked about some questions regarding new Salesforce projects, and now we are towards discussing on the questions regarding the existing CRM enhancements. So do you think which checklist is would be more, you can say, time consuming or easy to create? Do you think new projects take a bit less time to create those checklists, or the existing CRM enhancements would be taking more time because we need to understand, as you mentioned, the existing CRM on whichever platform it is?
Okay, so the answer to that question is, if I have understood it correctly, let me elaborate. Okay, so what I think you are trying to ask is how elaborative or how much descriptive or how we are going to create that list, okay, of set of questions, whether that set of questions will be more on the new CRM or it will be more on an existing CRM. Now my answer to that is, it completely depends on the existing snapshot of that customer's idea about CRM. Okay, so if that particular customer understands like, okay, my CRM is something where I can manage only my contacts or leads. Right. To be very true, even your phone can do that. Okay, just a contact management system. Now we need to make sure that we train or enrich the knowledge of that particular customer. Right. And the more we enrich it, the more that particular prospect is able to absorb it, the more questions, the more queries, the more requirement they will have. And that will help you identify the set of questions which you are able to build. Okay, I hope that answered your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, so a couple of few things. I'll try to do sort of a jump, and anyone, I will try to sort of take a quick break on that and let you all know. If any one of you want that list entirely end to end, so you can click on the link below and it will ask you to submit some information, and you can get that PDF list or that probably an Excel sheet list, and you can elaborate it further on for your specific requirements. Okay guys, data and CRM migration, that is again one of the projects which we get, which is very common, and many times when a CRM is being set up or a CRM is being designed, the data model is, I call it, data model is like something like a living being. Okay, it always evolves and changes and it grows and grows, or at times you find out that there is data redundancy and you try to scale, like cut it off on parts and try to make sure that you take a list of information which is important to you and rest of all. Okay, so data migration, always make sure that you try to ask the right set of questions, which is, what is the data set? Okay, what is the data set according to them? What is the size of that data set? Okay, and is there some cleaning required? By cleaning, we mean definitely that there can be data redundancy. There can be same information filled in multiple different places, and we need to summarize them at one place. Okay, so that should be there. Automation of data migration is needed or not, which is more towards integration. Now along with data, do you also wish to migrate the record owners, like who owns it? So probably you are moving from Zoho or any other CRM into Salesforce. So do you also want to move those users into, based upon those record users, you want to move it or not? Again, all this data might have some historical records as well, probably 10 years back, 5 years back, which might not be much relevant in today's date. You need to, but you are supposed to ask them, like, are those historical data needed or not? Okay, and definitely while designing a particular data model, you need to ask like what are the different sort of field mapping. Okay, so many times what happens is like we tend to set up a field mapping sort of a list. Okay, so from platform A to platform B, if we are moving a data and the data model is not identical, which in no case they are not identical at all. Because if it is identical, it is just a click of button. You click on a button and it will get moved from platform A to platform B. Right. And if they are not identical, then definitely a new set of research is to be done, which is data mapping, okay, field mapping. So we need to make sure that field mapping sheet is being done, and if there is any manual automation needed in that, that is also being done or not. Okay, so next set of questions we have are more towards special task. Okay, now ST, I have put in ST, special task. So special task means Pardot. Okay, so a particular customer might need a Pardot implementation. First of all, you need to know what is Pardot. You need to know what are the different tools. Okay, if it is a CPQ, if it is a marketing cloud, if it is commerce cloud, okay, whatever is the implementation, you need to make sure that you are aware of that product end to end. So going through that is very much important. Now, whenever a particular set of special task comes up, okay, you can create your own checklist, or you can have the checklist from where I am sort of trying to refer. So how prospects are being tracked currently, especially for Pardot, okay, and at the end of the day, are there any automation setup? Do you have any setup of scoring rules or grades which helps Pardot system set up properly? Okay, have you configured the landing pages and forms in your environment, and so on? So there is a huge list. I won't go each one of them, but I'll try to jump on to Marketing Cloud, which is again, it's all about marketing. So social listening, social content, social ads, engagement, measurement, workflow and automation. You can hear that off, like workflow and automation, running on the right marketing campaign, which we are very expert at, and setting up those journeys as well. And you should be aware of what is a journey builder, so that you can help a particular prospect or a client set up that particular journey builder which they want, or multiple set of journey builders depending upon the different pipelines. Okay, so what is the current business process? Again, you can see many of the questions are repetitive. You know that they are interested into Marketing Cloud, or according to their answers, we can make sure that, okay, you need Marketing Cloud. We can also suggest that same. Okay, so do you want to use Marketing Cloud Connect to make sure that all your data is connected? Is all the data model set up already? We need to set up the data model or not? And again, at the end of the day, reports, dashboards related to Marketing Cloud. Okay, so we have the same set of questions for CPQ. I think we have limited time over here, so I'm going to just scroll through them and go through Commerce Cloud, and then on Field Service Lightning, and our last but a very good one, which is special task on non-profit Salesforce packages. Okay, and dedicated resource or engagement. So let me talk a bit about that. Now, many times what happens is a particular engagement from a project coordinator point of view, okay, or from a sales guy from a point of view, you need to identify that, okay, if that particular project is not a fixed bid one, if you are able to get too many TBDs into it, like to be decided, whatever task to be decided, if you are getting a lot of too many TBDs in it, then definitely it naturally shifts into a TNM based project. Okay, now whenever there is a TNM based project, we also need to identify that what is their minimum budget, okay, and how much they want to accomplish at what sort of timeline, because that is going to help us push in more or less resource based upon what is their target of achieving during that particular timeline. Okay, and TNM and dedicated, very famous ones, time and material and dedicated resource, and probably that will help close that prospect deal at the end of the day, and you will be able to identify like, okay, yeah, you have the right requirement gathering done, and you can now get started with the project. Okay, so that's it from my end. Any last questions or anything you can see on your list?
Yes, so one question that I have is, since now we have covered all the topics, that is new Salesforce projects or the existing ones or the special tasks that are there in Salesforce. So do you think anyone, be it a person from management side, that is a project manager or a salesperson or technical expert, can ask these questions with the help of this checklist to the client? I hope you understood my question.
Yeah, definitely. That is the purpose of this list. So definitely that is the sole purpose of the list. And I would request our audience to definitely ask questions on comments, or you can drop us an email as well. And the list of questions which we have right now, we will be trying to sort of answer it on the comment section itself. Okay?
Right. So guys, as Ajay mentioned and even I mentioned in the beginning of this webinar, we have provided 2 email IDs, so you can choose whichever one if you want to directly ask or connect with Ajay. Please, you can go ahead and send him an email with the list of your questions. If you want to do it to me as well, I'll try and help you guys as well as much as I can. So I'd like to thank everyone who have taken out their time from their busy schedule on even Friday night. Thank you so much everyone for joining in today. We'll see you again in our next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.